All right, folks. So we have one here today that really warmed my heart, honestly. We have on a total super fan that has been with us for a long time, listening to the show. And she's a super big believer in everything share practices. And I got to say, it was just like, you're going to hear it. She's really great. She's got an amazing mindset and she owes a lot of it, or says she owes a lot of it to SP, but I think she's pretty special herself. Peyton, what do you think of it?
Yeah, it was just really awesome. I think it's very cool to hear when people have tried all the things. They've tried all the different ways to get connected with practices, whether it's, brokers, mailers, they've kind of like checked all those boxes. And I really feel like that's what she's done here. She sent her mailer. It was a big search radius. She's, willing to be in a smaller town, which is, just, personal preference. But yeah, it's really cool to see and having a good idea of what all the different things mean, what to look for in practice. Yeah, she's really just a kind of a poster child for like shared practices listener. So it's a really cool episode.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's people like this that they kind of make our job easier, but they also make our job harder because they're like so mind ready. Like they already kind of know all the stuff that we're thinking about, and so like we have to work a little bit harder to extract things out of the interview. But we actually end up having a really good time. So I'm gonna stop rambling and I'm gonna let Hannah take it away.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of The Pursuit of Ownership. It is Peyton here. And today we were going to have another real doc fake name, but we're actually going to have a real doc real name this time. So I feel like that's an exciting twist on things.
Mm-hmm.
Tyler, how do you feel about this?
I feel great. We got two fake docs with real names now interviewing a real doc with a real name. And I think that's really cool. So I won't be a fake doc for long. This is like my last month as a fake doc, but
I've never thought of this.
No, I'm super excited. So actually, just to kind of give people an idea of how quickly things are moving with this particular guest. So she actually emailed me about a practice she was interested in and was apparently feeling pretty confident about. It was maybe like a week ago. And she said, yeah, I'm kind of interested in this and I'd like to, maybe be on the show and talk about it. I was like, yeah, that's great. Cool. We'll schedule something. And then before long, there's a post on our page and she's talking about, hey, I'm going through this practice and I'm about to go into a transition. So she'd already put in an LOI and stuff. So she's moving super fast through this. And I'm just really excited to kind of hear about her journey and her thought process and all that. So Hannah, welcome.
Thanks, guys. I'm really excited to be on the podcast. I've been listening to shared practices since the beginning.
That's
and
awesome.
Yeah, I feel like I was able to kind of make that decision because of shared practices. So I'm hoping you guys agree because I'm kind of too far in at this point.
Hey, I mean, you sent it. Like I really have a lot of respect for that. You didn't wait for our interview, and a lot of people do.
Full send.
Yeah, exactly. So like I mean, if you've been listening since the beginning, I'm sure your decision was well guided, but that won't stop us from pointing out some red flags, of course. But
please do.
But yeah, so let's let's back up a little bit. And so Hannah, if you wouldn't mind just kind of sharing with us your story and kind of what brought you to this point.
Yeah, so can I discuss location? I guess I gave my name, so
yeah, that's entirely up to you, of course.
Okay. So I am from Washington State, but went to dental school in Portland at OHSU and graduated last year in 2020. And I've always wanted to be a practice owner. And so I figured I would be an associate for a year or two and then go into practice ownership. So I sent out a mailer back in June, I think. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of a weird time to send out a mailer because of COVID.
Yeah.
But I actually copied Tyler's mailer.
I saw it.
Because he posted it wonderful. On the Facebook page. I hope that's okay.
No, it's great. I was like super flattered actually. Like that the thought of that is like really, I mean, it's the imitation is the greatest form of flattery, isn't that right? So yeah, I was really happy you sent that along unashamedly.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, you made it really easy. So I sent that out and I sent it to about 650 dentists awesome. Outside of Portland because I did a radius about an hour and a half.
Okay.
And I got probably 20 responses, and every response I met up with the dentist or at least talked to them and tried to look at their practice and get an idea of who they were and what they were had to offer. And I learned a lot through that process. I feel like it was good, regardless of whether or not I pursued those practices. I learned a lot. And so then I ended up going into an associateship with an intent to get into ownership, but I never got the practice financials or anything. So it was kind of a slow process. And so then another dentist reached out to me 2 months ago and said that he's interested in selling his practice in 2021. And I pursued that. And then, yeah, the rest is history. I kind of knew that this was a hopefully diamond in the rough practice or something that I was really interested in after going there for the first time. So super nice doc and bread and butter practice. So I'm hoping you guys feel the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Dude, come on.
It's almost like we record podcasts together often.
Yeah, maybe a little too often. Yeah. So you mentioned that the dentist reached out to you. Was that something that had manifested from the mailer, or is that just like some networking you had done, or how did that person find you?
It was through the mailer, so he just emailed me because
awesome. Wow, that's I'm so glad that actually worked.
I know.
For sure.
Actually, I'm very curious. So you said you sent out your mailer. So you sent that out. Was that like right as you were graduating from dental school?
Yeah, like that month or the month after.
Okay, gotcha. And so the job that you ended up working with the intent to become, the owner there, what was that? What was the dynamic like when you were there? And kind of give us a little bit more details on what that experience was like for you.
Yeah, so older doc, he owns multiple practices actually. And initially, I didn't really think I'd be interested in multiple practices, but I decided to go with it. It's not multiple practices. One would be like a pseudo startup. So after working there for probably 2 or 3 months, I decided that I didn't even really need to see the financials to know that it wasn't something that I'd be interested in. But regardless, I was learning a lot from him and the other senior doctor and have formed a good relationship with them. But yeah, and I didn't have to be under contract because we were going to work all of that wording in after I saw the financials.
Okay.
But he just never got around to like giving me the financials. So, it was kind of a sticky situation because I didn't intend not to be contracted, but that's just how it worked out. So, yeah, I ended up having to tell them just this last weekend. So that was a really hard conversation for me because I've formed a good relationship with them, but they both understood and they knew that I wanted to get into ownership and just the timeline, like our timelines didn't match up and I didn't want multiple practices basically. So that's what I based it off of.
Right. So you say that they kind of knew from the jump that ownership was what you wanted. Was that something that obviously you were sending out a mailer, like, as you were graduating and everything. Is that something you've been intentional about for a long time, or is it something that kind of developed, around that time that you were graduating, or what?
No, I knew I wanted to be a practice owner before going into dental school. My parents are chiropractors.
Oh, perfect.
So they've owned their own practices and other businesses. So I feel like they've been good mentors for me and I just wanted to own.
Yeah, no, that's great. That is so awesome. Okay. Yeah. So, all right. So it looks like the first job out of school, there was some, not necessarily promise, but there was, potential for ownership, and that didn't necessarily pan out, but you feel like gained something from it, right? You said you had learned a good bit. So that's great. So, what are the sorts of skills that you are trying to, bring into this new opportunity? Did you learn any, additional clinical stuff? Did you learn a lot of leadership type stuff? What are you kind of bringing with you into this?
Mm-hmm. The practice that I'm at now, I just do mostly bread and butter, but one of the senior docs does a lot of TMD treatment.
Oh.
So I've really been trying to learn everything that he knows. And he's like, he's 80 years old and he's still doing like TMD treatment. And I don't know, we've just formed such a good relationship and I can ask him anything. So I feel like at least I can go back to him with anything that I have questions about, even in regular treatment. But I plan on bringing that to the new practice. But other than that, I'm still a new grad. I haven't been able to do super advanced procedures or anything like that. But what's good about this practice is it just is bread and butter. He refers out most all endo, complicated surgery, and doesn't place implants. So I feel more comfortable because that is something that I'm worried about, is not having a lot of extra experience.
Yeah, so that's you talk about experience and still feeling, like a new grad, and um, I'm kind of projecting from my own situation and I guess Peyton's situation, though maybe to a lesser extent. So, graduates of 2020 and certainly 2021 are people that have been, pretty adversely affected by COVID in terms of, experience in clinic and coming out oftentimes with, adjusted requirements and such. And some people kind of got pushed through, even though they didn't quite meet the numbers. So, how was your experience like going into an associateship out of school, without everything going on? Do you feel like that kind of stymied your growth at all? Or do you still feel, pretty clinically confident with everything?
So I throughout school, like I never really had problems with clinical skills.
Good.
I was always better in clinic than taking tests. So I was really confident in my skills. And then we graduated, and I actually didn't have to take REB. I took the DL OSCE because Oregon was one of the states that accepted it. So I didn't treat patients from March until literally November. So it was rough. I mean, I was happy to have that break, but at the same time, I was like, I know this is going to be rough getting back in. And so it was, I mean, so that is something that I've struggled with, is my confidence. Like I still feel like I have the skills, but just I don't get a lot of repetition even at my new job. I am doing hygiene, which I don't love. Yeah. So that's another reason why I wanted to leave. So yeah, I think my confidence, it's something that I struggle with, but I know that getting somewhere and having more repetition, it'll just come back with time. So I'm not worried about it, but it's something that I've been struggling with for sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that if you're having any issues with reps, one way to solve that problem is probably to purchase a practice. So
yeah.
Yeah, no, I think you've made a good call there. Yeah, that's awesome. No, I love that you've, I think that's a really interesting reflection, because a lot of people would look at that and say, oh, well, that means I'm not ready. If I don't feel ready and I haven't had as, many reps and time with patients as most people during, normal times, this is a good justification for me to put this off even more. And instead you've kind of pivoted that into, no, actually, I just want to go into a bread and butter practice where I'll be able to get more reps and build up that confidence a lot faster, as opposed to just sort of sticking around this job that's not really giving me the sort of flow that I want. So I think that's a nuance that's really important just as far as mindset's concerned. And there's just not a lot of people that think that way. So I really respect that.
And I think,
Thank you.
I think the other thing too is with the practice like that is if you do want to learn more procedures in the future, it's not like you're being forced to. Like it's not like the practice is already doing implants, already doing endo, and maybe that's something you don't have interest in. Like you can essentially build it to whatever you want it to be, which is a really cool opportunity.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that was really attractive to me as well. And initially I thought I would work as an associate for a year or two, but after working like for 6 months, and I know I could have, there are more ideal associateships, but you just want to change every little thing. And I know that I'm not meant to be an associate long term. So that was another reason.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's a blessing and a curse, listening to the podcast and knowing as much as because it makes it hard just to sit there and do nothing. You just kind of want to help out, make things as good as you can. And, as an associate, it's a tough place to be.
Yeah, that was hard. And I didn't want to be bossy and like try to change things. I was like, you know what? I just need to pursue ownership sooner than I thought. So
yeah. Well, now you're going to be expected to be bossy, so that's good.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm ready to, but we'll see.
Well, yeah. Well, we'll see. I agree. Mm-hmm. So, okay. So tell us about this practice then. I mean, we know kind of how you came across it. So kind of, beyond it being bread and butter and you liking the seller, kind of explain, what made you so confident in this opportunity that you just kind of went ahead and went for it.
Yeah, so the dentist has been really communicative with me throughout the whole time. Like the first time going to meet him, I brought my husband with me and he brought his wife, and we just met on a Sunday, and he showed me the practice. It's a really clean, not too modern. It's actually pretty dated. He has paper charts still, but he does run software just with perio charting and scheduling. So at least it's not 100% paper. And then the next two times that I went, I hadn't even submitted, like we hadn't even gone through with the LOI, but he allowed me to meet his staff. His staff has been there for a really long time. Like his hygienist has been there for 25 years, and one of the assistants another like 20 or 25 years. So they had really good things to say about him. It has 5 operatories. He runs 2 hygiene every day or the 3 days that he works. So I knew that he had a good hygiene program, a good base of patients.
And he probably wasn't doing his own hygiene.
Yes, very attractive.
That is key.
And he works 3.5 days. So that was attractive to me just as looking at my future, because I do want to have kids, hopefully in the next couple of years. And I don't want to be working 5 or 6 days a week.
Sure.
Location, I grew up in a small town, about 20,000 people. So I knew that eventually I'd want to get out of the city. And so this town has 50,000 people, and it's about an hour away from Portland. So at first I was thinking that would be too far, but after going there with my husband on the way back, we were like, that town's really cute, and I think we could envision ourselves living there. So yeah, other than that, he does bread and butter dentistry, like I said,
Right.
which I could come in and do. And he has a pretty small staff, just 6 people. So I felt like it was manageable, even though I'm young. It wouldn't be jumping into multi-practice or, a team that hasn't been there for too long. Like I felt like they could almost guide me as the owner if they stay on. So
one thing I'm realizing we really glossed over. What is it that you were looking for in practice ownership in terms of your model? Or do you see yourself being the solo practitioner long term, single location, group practices? I know you mentioned not too keen on multiple practices, but what is sort of like that ideal practice that you are sort of trying to build towards, or is that what you're seeing right now?
So I obviously haven't owned a practice yet, so this idea has changed a little bit, but I think I would like to be the sole owner, and because I've seen how hard it is. Well, I'm sure it can work, but how hard it is to keep associates long term, because if you have a good associate, then they're going to want more eventually and maybe own a practice. So I kind of wanted just a sole ownership and smaller staff, something manageable, because my husband is also going to be a professional. So I know that we're going to have a lot going on, and I don't want to overstep myself, I guess.
So to play devil's advocate a bit, so it seems like your hedge against, having too many obligations at work that can take away from family is working the smaller staff, smaller office for, 3 days a week or so, so that you're not, being at the office, too often throughout the week.
Mm-hmm.
As an alternative, do you perceive that as being more freedom than, say, having a larger office wherein you could be replaced by an associate and you'd be an absentee owner and have a little bit more agency as far as whether or not you need to go in the office?
Mm-hmm. I've thought about that, and I think would be attractive to me.
Okay.
Another thing that I've thought about with my husband is if we Oh, this doctor also owns the building, which is attractive to me, and he's open to selling the building
I
too.
was about to ask. Very good.
Yeah. But ideally, my husband and I could be in the same building that we own. And hopefully, if I wanted to expand my practice, say in the next 5 or 10 years, we could.
Okay.
So there's that option.
Great. And what's your husband do, by the way? Did you say it?
He's in chiropractic school.
Oh,
so he's graduating this year.
Perfect. All right. Yeah. Well, you're pretty familiar with that. That's awesome. Okay. Yeah. Have you guys entertained like a dental and chiropractic integrated practice?
Yeah, we're both, I guess, more on the natural side of medicine. And so we would like to have kind of a whole body approach.
Oh, cool.
And maybe integrated practices, who knows?
Yeah, I think
I feel like that would be cool. Yeah.
Be one of the first of its kind, that's for sure. Yeah. Okay, great. So, all right. So tell me about the building then. Is it, sort of like a standalone space? How much room do you think you have to expand if you were to choose to do that later on?
Yeah, it is a standalone space, and it is, I don't think there's any room to expand. Maybe, but it's kind of in a small parking lot, and I feel like if we wanted to expand, it would be in a different building.
Oh, okay.
But the building, I guess, what details do you want to know about it?
Do like maybe square footage, ops?
Oh, yeah. So it's 2,600 square feet, 5 ops. We might be able to squeeze in this 6th op. It has a doctor's office. He just has a piano, and it has a basement with a staff room, a pretty big staff room, and a back area where they keep charts. So it's pretty spacious, and it might have room to add a 6th op, but I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I would definitely look into what could be done in terms of adding operatories within that space. You'd have to kind of look at the layout and stuff, but 2,600 square feet, I would say that, so just to kind of give like a barometer for how I think about that. So in like a really highly efficiently ground up built dental practice that is meant to maximize the number of ops, yet still sort of like satisfy the minimum necessary like rooms and functions of a dental practice. The general rule is about 300 square feet per op. And that includes like all the other rooms that go along with it. And naturally that number kind of differs as you scale. So like if you have a 2,600, square foot office, if you were building it for efficiency from the ground up, theoretically you could have about 8 ops in there. But what you have existing is about 5, and a lot of it's sensitive to what's already there and like where things can kind of be moved and shifted around. But I would be surprised if there's not room for at least 1, maybe even in 2 ops if you kind of got creative about that, which I think would be really beneficial, because there is a very crucial transition that occurs when you go from having a 5 op practice to having a 6 and then a 7 op. That is something I would look into, because all of a sudden you start having a lot more options in terms of having associates in the practice, and perhaps affording yourself a little bit more freedom, whenever family that you and your husband are planning might come in the way, or vacations or things of that nature. So that would definitely be worth looking into, because like five ops is that like really like you're almost there to where you could maybe have like a viable, split shifted group-ish practice. And to stop just short of it when you have that much square foot, I think is losing out on some potential. So I would definitely be looking into that for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And his ops are pretty dated. Like I had an equipment rep go with me to look at everything, and he said the chairs will probably be the first thing that needs to be replaced. And all of his cabinetry is really old. It's clean, so it works. Cool. But it would be something that if I wanted to do a major remodel, like I could just do it all at once.
Yeah,
if I could afford that, but we'll see.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm still waiting for the day that I see a practice that is super modern and just has paper charts. I'm waiting for the day. I don't know if it's gonna come, but
that's tough, man.
Yeah. I can't say that I'm super surprised.
You caught him at a weird time.
Yeah. That's funny.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I will say too, on the, the subjects of ops and space and that kind of thing, like if you get into practice and you decide like, wow, I really love solo, I really love being in charge of everything, like the 5 to 6 op range is perfect. Like
Oh yeah,
that's the sweet
you're
spot. And
absolutely
with it
good point.
being 2,600 square feet, if maybe you decide like, hey, I don't want side cabinets in my ops anymore, or whatever it is, like it'll definitely give you a very spacious feel if you do decide to go down that route as well.
Yeah, I think it's something to look out for, and I don't see myself like with the speed of dentistry and everything checking to hygiene. Like I'm not really checking to hygiene right now, so I know that'll take a little bit of time for me to ramp up, and that'll give me enough time to really see if I want to go into that type of model.
Yeah, and ultimately, I'm not trying to push you one way or another, and I'm not trying to push the audience one way or another. It's really just about maximizing options, because ultimately, like you don't really know where your head's going to be at in 5 years. Like I think about where I was 5 years ago, and like where my head was at, and it's like not even remotely close. Like I never would have guessed that the sorts of things I'm getting into or what I'm getting into. So, it's just about preserving options, because we just never really know where life takes us. So, but yeah, no, it actually seems like you're set up pretty well for that. And, with the option to own the building, and, have some autonomy there with how things change moving forward is good. But it seems like you're pretty comfortable with the solo setup for the time being. And, we can definitely run with that. So, yeah, no, that's great. So, tell me a little bit about, how you have planned this transition process. What is the seller's mindset? What's their timeline? How have you two kind of coordinate how things could go down?
So I really did everything I could. I tried to before he got the appraisal done. So about 2 months ago when we started talking, he said that he was having someone come in to appraise it, and that probably took at least a month. So during that time, I tried to get like my reach out to my lender options, try to find a lawyer that I liked and a CPA. And I talked with a lot of different people and got recommendations. Like, we get all these people during school. So I kept all those contacts, and they sent me good recommendations. So I tried to talk with people, and I picked out my team. And that's one thing that the broker has talked to me about. He said, you picked a really, really good team to help you, all dental specific. So definitely try to do that if you can.
Sure.
And talking with the seller, he basically gave me the broker gave me the appraisal, and I submitted an LOI within a day because I had my lawyer picked out, and he was really fast about it.
Awesome.
Because I knew that he was talking to other people. I didn't know how many people, and I wanted to be competitive. So I put in a full price offer because I felt like the practice was correctly valued. I actually did a valuation based on one of the episodes in shared practices they went over, and it was really close to what the appraisal was. So I was kind of happy about that. And then he sent back the LOI the next day, and yeah, I kind of forgot the question.
Yeah, that was all good stuff. Yeah, that was all things we're curious about.
Yeah, exactly. I forgot the question too, but that all sounded pretty good. Yeah, so just some things that kind of stick out to me. Sometimes I forget that listeners can't see the spreadsheet in front of us. So a few things that I noticed just looking through it. Obviously we've got 5 ops. That's one of the first things I always look at in terms of what sort of possibilities we have model wise. But we already talked about that. New patient flow is about 10 new patients per month is what we're reporting here. But comparing that against the marketing budget, which is like virtually non-existent, I feel okay about that, in terms of being able to support yourself as a doctor. I think that, you should be able to drum up the necessary, external growth to get that going within, 6 to 9 months of sort of implementing, some comprehensive marketing. And that'll be a bit of an additional expense, but probably not too much, right?
Tyler, I was going to say too, like on top of that, like with the, being paper charts, being an older practice, I can't imagine their website and like online presence is very good.
It's a good question.
Yeah. So I would assume, that's one thing that you could easily add and really, help get your reputation up, for external marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That is one question that I was wondering, is when I should go digital. I know some people have done it right away, but I don't really want to shock the staff with that. So I was thinking within the first probably 3 to 6 months, try to go.
I think within the library of Share Practices episodes, there's probably been every different type of possible advice on, implementing new things with staff. And I think the safest thing to say would be to trust your intuition, right? Like get to know the staff and kind of get an idea of what they're comfortable with, and kind of play this however Hannah wants to play this. But at the same time, there is something to be said for setting the right expectations, right? So like if you go too long floating the same boat that's always been floating, then when changes come along, you're now sort of overturning the expectations they had already set. If you pick your battles smartly and you do that right off the bat, and you get them sort of a little bit more accustomed to the idea of change, then perhaps that expectation will be there as you go along. But this is something that I've thought about myself and still do not feel 100% confident with in saying like, this is the way you should do things. And I'm not sure that there even really is a right answer. Peyton, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Actually, so I'm just trying to think of how I would go about this situation. And honestly, I feel like the fact that you've already gotten a chance to meet the staff is actually a huge leg up for you in the situation.
Yeah.
Given the fact that it sounds like they're pretty warm to you and pretty warm to you being there. For me, I feel like if I was going into this situation, I would probably tell them, be like, hey, like, I definitely want to move to, electronic eventually. But at the same time, I also want to respect how you guys have been doing this. I really want to see how you guys work. Obviously, a lot of things have been going well here. So I really want to see how that's going. And then, as we go on, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, we can make that change and, it'll make it a lot more seamless. So I feel like that's how I would go about it. But, there's plenty of ways to do it.
Yeah, I think that's a good approach, especially because the staff is older. I mean, some of them are pretty close to retirement, and one of them is actually thinking about retirement when the doctor does. So I definitely want to respect that and see if I can learn as much from them before transitioning.
Well, that might actually be a good thing, because that means you can get some new blood in there, and with that new blood, you can be implementing new systems. And in terms of strategizing for how you go about getting some more external growth in this practice, and start tracking it, and knowing all the sorts of metrics and things that you will certainly want to know after you go to the live event this July, which we talked about earlier. Starting to digitize things, and having a really good feel of what's happening within your practice is going to be pretty essential. And there's just such a big lag time between when you start collecting that data and when you can really analyze it and have power with it. So I would definitely that would be one of the first battles that I would try to pick very wisely upon going into the practice. But I think your head's in the right place with that for sure.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. And then let's see. Another thing that I saw was we got a 33% hygiene production ratio. Which
I'm happy about that.
Yeah. I'd love to see it. I'm really happy about that. I'm happy to know that you won't be contributing to that hygiene production anymore. So that's cool.
We got a little fist pump from Hannah there for everyone that can't see her right now.
Yeah, definitely. And just sort of looking at the procedure mix and based off some things that you said, I mean, I think this is in very many ways a layup for someone that's in your position and with your level of experience. I think this is a great and comfortable practice for someone that's comfortable with going into solo ownership and isn't going to have to come in and just learn a whole bunch of new tricks right off the bat in order to reproduce what the seller was doing. Some things that kind of stick out to me as being a little bit out of whack and could use some addressing is we got 35% staff costs. So, I mean, you mentioned that there's, an extant staff that's been there for a long time. I'm assuming there's been incremental raises without incremental proportionate raises in production. So, that's the sort of thing that we can see with older practices and older staffs and stuff like that. And you already mentioned that someone might be leaving. So, it'll be an interesting thing to navigate. Have you kind of looked into payroll and gotten sort of a sense of, how that staff percentage has been attained?
Yeah, I have. And that was a number that once I did the calculations, it did seem high to me. I mean, 35% is like the max you want, right?
Yeah.
For overhead. So
It's tough. Yeah.
I didn't feel like they were overpaid, but I know that they've been getting raises every year, even if it's probably 25 cents or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So that was concerning, and I'm not really sure how to decrease that other than getting different staff once they retire and younger staff maybe.
Yeah. Well, I think it's going to be a combination of that is I think it's pretty inevitable since it is an older staff, and also just sort of outgrowing it and trying to outgrow some of those fixed expenses and just run a tighter ship. And as you add production, I mean, currently it looks like the doctor production within the practice is about 600K, which I think you won't have too many issues improving upon that within even your first year. So obviously you'll kind of dilute that number a good bit over time. And another thing that kind of makes me feel better about is instead of just looking at staff costs as in a vacuum and saying this is the percentage range we look at. 35% is high. You're absolutely right about that. But we kind of look at fixed expenses as a whole. And currently the facility expenses are about 11%. And, combining the two, you have, combined fixed expenses of 46%, but we're also talking about, potentially owning the building. So I kind of look at that as a hedge against some of those fixed expenses. So I don't feel quite as bad about that. Though, it is a mitigating factor to what your bottom line is going to look like. I mean, it looks like cash flow after debt service is around, 50K or so, which is, comfortable, nothing, terribly lucrative, but, it's livable. So, yeah, I mean, on the whole, I think this is a decent opportunity. I think there's low hanging fruit here, and I think that you're going to be able to take the reins and do really well with it. And obviously, you already knew that, so I'm not telling you anything you didn't already know.
Oh, good. Well, what else can you pick apart? I mean, there has to be some other things.
I was going to say, is there anything that you've identified that is? I know Tyler kind of brought up some of the number stuff, but is there anything that you've identified as somewhat of a negative or a red flag in this opportunity?
I haven't seen any red flags per se. I think the thing that I'm most worried about is just my leadership and taking on that older staff that I mean, from what I've met, they're really nice, but they could all be like my mom or my grandma even. So I don't want to like disrespect that relationship. So I am signing up for shared practices coaching and mastermind starting next month. So I'm just hoping that'll get me through.
Yeah.
I'm really glad you asked that question, Peyton.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, like, you're doing all of the right things. Like, you're, enrolling in coaching, enrolling in mastermind, like I don't say all, but most of the people that are in that group or in that situation are fresh owners. So it's all of the fresh owner things are super new and super, ingrained in their mind at this point. So yeah, I mean, I can definitely see why that would be something you would think about. And I feel like, honestly, for most owners, that is a huge part of it, leading a team, especially when, a lot of them are maybe 2 or 3 times older than you. But, given, how much you've prepared for this and what the steps that you're taking to be, in a good position, I think you're going to do awesome, honestly.
Yeah, and we've done a number of these interviews now, and I've talked to a number of coaching clients, and I've interacted with the masterminds and stuff every day, and I would say that the fear you have is not one that you're alone on. I mean, it's the most common fear that we run into whenever someone's going into owning a practice, and I see absolutely no correlation with people who have more or less fear correlating with having more or less experience in dentistry. I'm not sure that has anything to do with it. I mean, I think that people have the fear and then they justify the fear by saying, I haven't been in practice long enough, or I haven't done enough dentistry, or I just have so much more to learn. And that's just how they justify a feeling that really everyone has. And so if it's not experience, if someone's been an associate for a long time, it's going to be some other reason that they don't think they're apt to, lead that dental practice and take on that risk and shoulder that burden. And so we're always looking for reasons to justify that feeling, but really the feeling is pretty ubiquitous. And so, the answer is not necessarily, it's not going to be more CE. It's not going to be staying in this associateship. It's not really making you 100% satisfied for longer. It's going to be surrounding yourself with a support system and people who have been through what you've been through, and finding relatability in the people that you look up to. And, that's something that personally I've had with shared practices. I've gotten to look up to people that had the exact same fears that I've had, the entire time that I've been going through dental school. And that's always reassured me that, the fear is always the same. No matter where you're coming from or what you think your strengths or weaknesses are. So I think you're taking all the right steps. You're putting yourself in the right spaces, and it's a recipe for you just to go out there and be super, super successful. So I am super excited for you with this opportunity. And I think that even if it weren't, is perspective as it is, I think you would still do well with it, just because you have that sort of mindset, and you're the person that just kind of goes on the attack and knows what they want. So those are a lot of really good predictors for success.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I mean, I feel like the main reason why I feel more comfortable going through with this is just because of shared practices. Like you guys and George and Richard have created a space where, us young professionals can dream about that stuff. And we see that there's other people our age going for it. And so I'm really thankful for shared practices.
Wow, that's awesome. And I can promise that like you would have to try to make a mistake that, someone in SP hasn't already made, right? Like we have enough of a network now to where literally anything that you come up against is something that someone's already been up against. So there's always things that you can learn from other people's experiences. And, I think you make a great point. Like I don't really take any particular credit in that. I'm happy to be a part of it. But I think that, having people like George and Richard and Matt and Alex setting examples for, what can be done and early in someone's career, and just sort of opening up that realm of what's possible is just incredibly empowering for all of us. So I'm super happy that you've been listening for so long, and you've been listening to some of our episodes, and that you would come on the show with this opportunity you had. And I really look forward to meeting you in July. I look forward to seeing you in the masterminds and everything. And I'm certain we'll be hearing from you again on the show, and we'll be talking about how you're absolutely killing it with this practice.
Awesome. I hope so. And thank you guys for being open to interviewing me. And
of course.
Yeah, I'm excited to meet everyone too.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Hannah. Well, thank you so much. We'll be hearing from you probably in 6 months to a year, when you're like, practically a millionaire and making us all look like scrubs. So thanks again for coming on.
Okay. Thank you guys.
All right. So that's a wrap on that episode. Payton, what'd you think?
It's like I said in the intro, like she really has her information down, and I think she's going to do awesome. One thing I will say, I know she was talking about how she kind of had some worries about the leadership and the, running the business aspect of things. And I don't know if anyone's ever had this thought before. They probably have, but like that is the one part of practice ownership that you can't practice before practice ownership. And it makes sense why that's a big fear for so many people, is because, you can practice clinical, you can practice, I guess, like other things. But as far as running the business, like you can't practice that unless you own the business. So it really makes sense why that is a common fear for so many people. But she's going to be in an awesome spot to, deal with those fears, and she's just going to kill it. I know it.
Yeah. For me, honestly, that's where the episode started. Like when you asked that question and then she started talking about that, I was like, oh, here we go. Here's the juicy stuff. Because everything up to that point was pretty much business as usual. And it was someone who, kind of already knew what they were looking at and had already started making moves on it. And so it's like, this is just kind of like, she's like really awesome, but, everybody kind of knows how this is going. But then when she started talking about that and being vulnerable about it, I just thought that was really great. And I'm glad that she was willing to do that. And then the other note, I think too, that really struck me is how she, I kind of asked about her experience as a dentist. And, she kind of talked about how, the associateship had not really yielded her quite as many reps as she wanted. And she wasn't feeling super clinically confident, but she figured that she would get that sort of experience in owning the practice. Like she pretty much said that herself. And it's like, that is the sort of, mindset, like go for it type thing that really separates out certain people. Because most people don't make that conclusion, right? It's like a non sequitur. Like they're setting up and saying, yeah, I really don't have a whole lot of experience. So, generally they want to stay in the position that they're at until they start getting this feeling that they're going to be ready, because everyone has to be ready on day one. Like you have to have every skill you need the first moment you step into practice. And that's just, I mean, it's total bunk. Like we've blown that wide open. We've proven that people that think that they know what they're doing will go into it and have absolutely no clue and just get totally like on their heels immediately. They're on the ropes and they're like, man, I thought I knew everything. Right. We've seen both sides of it. We've seen people that, had no confidence really, but they went into it anyway and they ended up doing great. We've seen people that have all the confidence in the world and they find out that there was no amount of studying or readiness that they could have had that would have really prepared themselves. And what really makes the difference is just that willingness to get into the situation, put yourself in the thick of it, and ultimately fail and be in positions where you don't have the answers, but be resourceful and be swift and quick on your feet. And Hannah's going to do that so well. I just, but between the point you mentioned and that point, I think that was those were the gold nuggets of that episode for sure. I think people, we kind of know like what the predictable, like bread and butter solo practice looks like for maybe a new grad that is interested in that type of model. And that's kind of what this was. But it's the mindset and leadership stuff that we always keep coming back to, and it's just this bottomless well of goodness that just and it just leaves us, just like thinking, wow, like that's how we should all be thinking about this, right? So I was super happy about that and super impressed with her. So just really glad that she could come on the show.
Yeah, definitely. She early in the episode, she either said like full send or send it. And I knew from that point on, I was like, we have found a top-notch interviewer here.
I know, we were all speaking the same language.
Exactly. Yes. If someone comes on and says that in an interview, respect. That's all I got to say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, she knows how to send it. She did before she even came on here. So that's pretty special. But yeah, folks, I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. It was a real pleasure. It feels really good to have Share Practices fans. Peyton and I have had a few interactions with a couple of you guys and girls at conferences and stuff, and that's always really cool. But to have someone on here on the show that has just been so adherent to like different things that we produce and is going to be at the live event and wants to be a mastermind and coaching client, all these things, like, man, it feels really good to have people that believe in this as much as we do. So we're really flattered by that, and just can't wait to see where she goes. But all right, that's it for this week, and you guys will be hearing from us shortly.